Mr. Giselle?
Yes.
Mr. Gillen? Yes. Mr. Martis?
Yes.
Mr. Castle?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, we can pencil in these limits as of right now. 40, 45, 45.
And scratch the part that makes it a relative limit, otherwise it's ambient plus 45. And that would be about 100. As I noted in my draft.
Right.
I'm changing to a fixed limit, which is what Vestas, it's my understanding, recommends in their documentation.
Same thing Goldberg pretty much
Right,
recommends.
his was, that's,
Can't trust the manufacturer of the turbine. Who can you trust? Would you like me to address another motion that may not directly have language in this ordinance, but which I think should be added? I'm free to do that?
sure.
Okay. Let me see, there's copies of this motion. December 6, 2010, I move the following. Whereas noise is a known stigma effect and is an inhibitor to residential use of land. Whereas our master plan and zoning ordinance identifies areas that are suitable for residential use. Whereas the current trend in planning practice is to integrate planning where possible across jurisdictional boundaries, I move that we therefore insert language into our zoning to this effect, and you can consult with Mike about the best place to do it. No utility scale wind turbine may introduce noise above 35 dBA into any residential or mixed-use residential district, zoned or planned in Riga Township or any adjoining jurisdiction.
You're going to create an overlay district?
No, I think this effectively does it without going through the bother of creating an overlay.
Let's get the motion on the floor and then we'll discuss it, okay?
White did second.
Yes, it's been moved and seconded that we consider this insert of language into the zoning. No utility scale wind turbine may introduce noise above 55 dB, 35 to any residence or mixed-use residential zone, district, or planned.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And we had the discussion a month or so ago about our master plan reflects areas that aren't presently zoned residential as their future use to become residential, primarily west of, east of here, and also a bit down Cemetery, which is probably not likely to be developed thanks to the proximity of the ethanol plant. But by setting a 35 decibel limit to those, it preserves those areas for future residential growth. Likewise, I think it's not reasonable, and they tell us in all our meetings to consult with adjoining municipalities. It's not reasonable to let our ag district permit the construction of turbines 1,000 feet away from houses in the village of Blissfield. That's not reasonable to them. Neither is it reasonable to do that to the village of Berkey. 35 decibel limit is going to offer them some protection. I do not know how big a setback that needs to be to reach 35. But I know that much noise is not, in my mind, is not acceptable in a pure residential or mixed-use residential district.
I have a problem voting for this because of the fact that I think it has to be defined where these districts are.
They are in the zoning ordinance. We have residential and mixed use in our zoning now.
And we're worried about Riga Township. We're not worried about Berkeley.
Well, this protects the village of Riga, and it protects our districts that are zoned residential and future use residential, and we're asking to extend the same thing to Berkey and to the village of Blissfield. If we put a turbine 1,000 feet away from the houses on, in Blissfield or next to the school, after we've separated them a substantial degree from the houses in our own township, That doesn't seem to me to be neighborly conduct, and it's contrary to everything we hear in these citizen planner classes and elsewhere, which is to consult and take into consideration the needs of the adjoining municipalities. I think we can legally stick them right up on their back door if we want. I don't think it's good land use policy.
Has anybody contacted Elkton, and there's some right beside the school at Elkton, 2 of them?
I don't know about Elkton. I know that the 10 families that are suing John Deere and the Thumb are 1,800 feet away from the nearest turbine.
Well, I wonder how this would shoehorn in with our, if this would have any effect on the noise and nuisance ordinance that we have now.
I don't know.
Well,
I mean, if this language needs to go into the ag district language, so be it. If you think, it should probably go into this ordinance. I don't know. I thought Mr. Homer could give us some direction on that. But other than that, I think we need an overlay district to say there's certain areas that we don't want them. I mean, if we build them right along the limits of the village near our residential district, we have effectively inhibited residential construction in a place that our master plan says future residential construction ought to go to. And I don't see a purpose in conflicting those uses. We are not under obligation to give every last acre of ag district over to wind turbines. That's up to us to decide. And a 35 decibel is probably going to be somewhere between 3/4 of a mile and 1.25 miles setback from, mixed use or pure residential districts. I don't think that's too much to ask. I think it's simpler than trying to create an overlay and arguing about exactly where it goes. The developers will know ahead of time what our sensitivities are, and they will be able to honor that and respect that. They know what the playing field is now.
any further comment? Well, I would propose that we table this postpone until, I'd like to have Mike Homier look at this to see if this would conflict our noise and, or,
Maybe it would complement it. Because it's regulating just wind turbine noise. And it may be our nuisance noise thing already applies, except if we're permitting a certain amount of noise in residential uses in the ag district, we can no longer label it a nuisance noise. We've now labeled it a permissible noise. And that's what makes it difficult. I don't think it's unreasonable to restrict it. I'm not even sure the developers are that keen to project 45 or 50 decibels into our downtown. I just don't think they want to. I don't think this is a big objectionable issue. Probably more debatable about how sensitive we need to be to the village of Bushville and the village of Berkey, but it seems neighborly and reasonable to me. If I lived in those two towns, I would hope somebody was watching out for me and joining municipality. But you never know.
Are you making a motion to postpone?
I have that right? Okay, then I'm asking that we postpone this until the lawyer looks at this language and see how this may either shoehorn into what we have and then the noise and the nuisance ordinance that's already in place.
This simply makes a recommendation that language like this should be accommodated somewhere in the ordinance. It doesn't say where.
Well, he may have an idea where that would.
Right. I don't see why we couldn't approve this type of standard now. You guys can always change it later, but then at least he'll then have a chance to look for where it goes. And it doesn't hurt anything to vote on it and get it off the table now.
Well,
Are you making a motion to postpone?
I move that we postpone this until Mike looks at it.
I'd support that.
It's been moved and seconded that we postpone this until consulting with the township lawyer. Is there any discussion on this?
I'm very hurt.
But you're a big boy, I know.
I think
Okay. We'll proceed to vote by roll call again.
Mr. Gillen? Yes. Mr. Martis?
No.
Mr. Castle?
Yes.
Mr. Dusel? Mr. Carter?
Yes.
The ayes have it.